Good afternoon. It is 5:50 in the afternoon on February the 11th. This is a meeting of the Finance Committee. My name is Tom Kendall, Chair. To my right is John Swayzer, a member of the committee, and Mr. Todd Siebert is on my left. We have two items coming before Finance today, so Mr. Titterington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Loan Review Committee entertained and discussed an application for a small business development revolving loan to Slimline Surgical Devices, and they are doing business as Canyon Run Engineering Technologies. They moved into Troy last year. They're out at West Stanfield Road, and you previously authorized a loan to them to help them with that move. They have 17 full-time and one part-time employee, and they've been doing quite well in the past year. They have an opportunity to bring in some contract work by buying a piece of equipment to do so that will cost $215,000, and so they came to the committee requesting $82,500 of small business development RLF money. We are, after discussing it as a committee, the committee is recommending the project in the amount of $83,737.50. That is the $82,500 plus rolling in the 1.5% closing fee, which is something that we do quite often. The terms of the loan would be 60 months, 4.5% interest payment. We would take a second position on the equipment, and then to reach full collateralization, we would have owner personal guarantees. We are asking that this be approved as emergency legislation so that we can close the loan as quickly as possible, get them in, and get that equipment ordered and installed. They are committing a minimum of 5 additional employees over the next 3 years as part of this project. The owners are in the audience if you have any questions. And again, we are requesting emergency legislation.
Okay, thank you. I will say one thing as chairman of the Loan Review Committee. It's really refreshing when we have a group come back to us again after they have successfully used the monies that we provided them and are doing exceptionally well, over and above, I think, even their expectations. The one thing that really impressed me was the fact that they were going to hire more salespeople, but they can't because they're already maxed out at this point from a production standpoint. So, Mr. Siebert, do you have any questions?
No, I read through the application earlier today, read through it again. It looks like there will be 2 machinists, 1 salesperson, and then moving on up 2 more, and gave a nice projection. I mean, that's the purpose of doing this, is to increase employment opportunities, and it looks like it's all in order, so I have no problem going forward with this.
Okay. John?
I have no questions.
Okay. Any other council people have any questions, comments? Okay. Anybody from the audience? All right. Did we want this as emergency then?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm good with emergency.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem with emergency.
All right. Let's move forward with emergency.
Thank you. Second item is a recommendation to adjust some cemetery fees. It's been several years. Cemetery staff has reviewed the various fees that we have in place. Mr. Funderburger is going to make that presentation to you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. As Patrick mentioned,
it's time to do a periodic review of the fees at the cemetery, an area that's obviously near and dear to everyone's heart, but we don't maybe think about at times. And I want to commend Mr. Hastings, who's in the audience, for doing a comprehensive review. He has reached out to various area cemeteries, both from a public standpoint and a privately operated and owned standpoint. And when you do that, you come across a number of different ways to operate and charge for services, to the point where it's hard to compare apples to apples. But he did a good job of going back and trying to do a couple of things. One, compare fees so that they are as comparable as possible to the going rates in this immediate region. And I think he's done a nice job of capturing that. Take into consideration what our true costs are, and then try to lay those out in a way that is transparent for people to clearly understand. And I would say that makes it difficult for me to try to explain some of the ways we've been charging, but we've tried to lay out what we're currently doing and then capture the changes in yellow on the documents that you have in front of us. And I'd be certainly glad to answer any specific questions, but I think you're going to see that a majority of the operations at the cemetery, because of the efficiencies that David and his team have put in over the last few years, he's been able to maintain cost and actually reduce overall labor cost and operating expenses for a 5-year rate here right now. However, due to labor costs and prices going up, we do need to offset some of those with our fees. So that's what you see kind of reflected, an attempt to reflect that in front of you tonight. And yet, as I said earlier, majority of the operations when it comes to interments at the cemetery happen between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. Monday through Friday. And if you'll look on the page that was presented to you, those fees are not being recommended to go up at all. So majority of the rates are going to stay the same. The most of the yellow that's highlighted there come when services extend into after hours, weekends, overtime, and we're really not staffed to handle that in our normal rate, because our hours are usually 7 to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. So he's tried to break that down into a step fee structure that will be very clear to any customer at Riverside and to the local funeral homes as well, so that they'll be able to take this rate and share that with their customers as well and express it very clearly. These are flat amounts. The new rates through in here are flat amounts and are very fixed, so that there aren't any additional fees that would come if someone would say, if they come in even past this is all rolled into these fixed costs. It takes into consideration, as I said, their labor costs, both leading up to a service, the day of the service, and then again the perpetual care that goes on that we never completely capture the cost of, but we try to make sure that we've got these fees somewhat indicative of that. And then I think, again, it is comparable to the area cemeteries as well. So I don't really want to go through line by line with this. I'll be glad to answer any specific questions that you might have. But I think that the folks that would see an increase in these are those folks who would choose or need services beyond our typical operating hours. And those are the folks that would see some additional costs come their way. And I think those are be able to be justified and explainable very, very simply. So without going into too many, we have reviewed this with the auditor and their staff. Mr. Hastings' staff was involved all along the way, along this process. We have reached out to the local funeral homes as well to make sure that they are at least informed with what we're looking at. And And again, I think this is a much clearer way to look at charging for services. There are also some new services that we provide that weren't even available, 3 or 4 years ago. So we've had to come up with some fees, comparable fees regarding those as well. So, any questions that I can answer for you at this time?
I just have a question. What percentage of funerals occur on a Saturday versus a weekday?
We're averaging about 150 to 160 total funerals a year. That trend is going up by about 5 to 10% every year for the last 3 to 5 year running. And 34 were actually held on a weekend this past year. So
a third.
about 25%, somewhere in there.
But yeah, if you're 150.
Yeah. And we are also seeing, compared when you look at these numbers, the increased amount of cremations, and so some of those prices are reflected in here as well.
Have we ever had somebody work on Saturday that we did have to pay overtime for?
We have our staff is tight, as you know, and we have those scheduled Monday through Friday when the majority of the work is done. We've never had a true weekend schedule. I don't know that we'd even have the team to be able to do that. We need our current team that Monday through Friday when majority of the work's going on, both from funeral standpoint or maintenance standpoint. Occasionally we've had some flexible seasonal helpers or staff mark in the summer that we can float their schedule a bit, which helps offset, but that's limited.
No, I think David did a good job. I don't know philosophically if that makes sense. That 25% of our funerals happen on a day that we have to pay overtime, that's the best allocation of personnel time, but that's way beyond my pay grade, so okay. I'll let David, if David thinks that that's the best way to handle it. He's done a great job out there, and we appreciate his help.
John?
Did I hear you say that these were competitive, that we had reached out to other cemeteries?
We have comparable size cemeteries in this area. For example, Sydney's the one that's the closest to ours. We're probably still a little under some of theirs on certain services, and some of their fees are not in black and white and bold where you can understand them. They come after the fact, or they're tacked on later on, so it's hard to compare. The private cemeteries in this area were definitely under, but then they can charge accordingly. They don't have any government supporting them as well, so we're always sensitive to that funding.
Do we do pre-sales? I hear on different.
We do. Yeah, we do.
And it's the same prices as these, or?
Well, on all of our services, we do pre-sales, and you can see the price for just the pre-sale of a grave is going from $660 to $700. So I think that's just a cost of living increase over the last 3 years.
Okay. I have nothing else. Thank you.
Any other council people? Marty?
I'm trying to understand your chart here on the first page of the chart. In that second section where they're opening and closing funeral and related fees, we show in the first line there for adult, we show $660 for the normal workday, and then it says $860. Out in the margin, it says $1045. So does that say we're going from $860 to $1045 on that service? Is that what is that how you read that, or no?
Not identical. No, that one's not completely lined up, but the potential for overtime costs could go up to $1,045 in our current scenario, whether that's on a weekday or a weekend day, depending on how long it is extended. So we put that number out there as as really the overtime, total overtime cost above the 660.
So they would pay 660 plus?
No, no. If someone would,
If it's after 3 PM, tell me what they would pay.
if they're scheduled and they know they're going to come in after 3 PM because of their service, or, that's what they've planned, then they would be charged $860 versus the 660 for a weekday.
Okay, so so what's on the chart in the regular columns is what they would be paying.
Right.
It's the total fee, yes.
And so then what's the overtime out there? Is that,
That's how we're currently trying to calculate. It's 660 plus overtime could be up to $1,045 depending on when they show up and how long they stay. And so it's kind of billing after the fact in some cases, or not really always getting clear information from the funeral homes themselves.
because it says new step system, and I was trying to understand.
Yeah, the new step system goes along with that top line of just those 4 steps now.
4 time periods, in other words.
Yeah, 4 time periods, and everything underneath that in off to the right and without the yellow is kind of a current way of calculating.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Is this emergency or?
We are not requesting emergency.
John?
Maybe
Yeah,
April
I'm good.
1st or May 1st.
Yeah, I have no problem. And again, I want to thank David. That's
Yeah.
good work.
All right, let's go forward.
All right, thank you.
Unanimous. Anything else come before finance?
Thank you.
Meeting is